Hey
Good
y'all,
morning.
it's Andy.
We will get started in just a minute here. Just doing an audio check. If you can hear me okay, please type in and let us know that you can see me and hear me, and we'll get started in just a minute.
Hey Bronwyn, it's Andy. Happy to see you.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining us. Nice to hear your voice.
Yep. I think in the interest of all concerned, you can't see my face, so.
Correct. Andrew will not be joining us visually today, but I'm sure we have lots of wonderful images to take your place.
Indeed.
We did begin the recording of this session, just for everyone's information. For our grant reporting purposes, when you sign in, if you could let us know what institution you're with. If you're affiliated with an institution, we'd like to know that too. It looks like Kathy and Meg, if you could let us know who you're with, that would be helpful. And welcome to this Illinois Collections Preservation Network webinar. My name is Bronwyn Eves, and I'm the project manager of this grant. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to the Illinois State Library, and especially Debbie Agert, for hosting our series today. This program and all ICPN programs would not be possible without the support of the ICPN Steering Committee and the IMLS. Today's webinar, as I mentioned, will be recorded and can be found on our website later this week. If you need to review it, like to review it, or have any colleagues that couldn't join us at this time, please text in your questions, and I'll moderate this session, and Andrew might interrupt you if there's a pertinent question or clarification, or we'll save them till the end, and hopefully we'll have time for Andrew to answer some of your questions. At this point, I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Andrew Bullen is the Coordinator for Information Technology at the Illinois State Library and a resident of Pullman. Andrew has been involved in the digital preservation and presentation of artifacts and images since 1993. With that, I will turn it over to Andrew and look forward to your presentation.
Okay. Let's see how to begin. I just wanted to say I am, as Bronwyn says, have been involved in the preservation of digital images and information about those digital images since '93, and it has been my very proud accomplishment to be able to work with the Illinois State Library, at the Illinois State Library, and work with the Illinois Digital Archive System, idaillinois.org, where you can see the Pullman stuff that we're going to talk about, as well as other incredible collections. Several hundred collections are scattered throughout the state of Illinois describing our local history. So let me tell you about my work with my local area, with the neighborhood of Pullman and the Pullman State Historic Site. I've been working with them as a volunteer programmer and been very happy working and doing all kinds of good stuff. Let me show you what I've done. Sorry, Debbie Bronwyn, can you see that image?
You have to stop sharing and then go ahead and start sharing your document.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. There we go.
There you go.
Apologies. Let's try this again, shall we?
No.
All right. This is a picture of George Mortimer Pullman. He was born in 1831 in a town called Brockton, New York, which is about 50 miles southwest of Buffalo. His father was a farmer, and who later went into the more lucrative trade of carpenter and working on the Erie Canal. George had a lot of experience working with his father and his uncle on the Erie Canal, which will prove to be very important later on in his life. He left school after the 4th grade to work with them. And of course, George Pullman, and the reason we're here together, the reason we're sharing this time together, is George Pullman was responsible for a revolution in travel and in culture of the United States, helped build the United States. It was a classic 19th century, you can call him robber baron, classic 19th century tycoon, basically. He didn't invent the concept of the palace car, the elegant way of traveling, but he certainly made it economical, and he certainly was the largest purveyor of sleeping car services in the United States. Here's a picture of George and his family. This is after George has made his fortune. This is a photograph from 1893. We're here at the Fairlawn Estate, which is in New Jersey. This is one of his several houses that he had. Here is his terrifying mother, who is Emily, and his brother, James Minton, who was a renowned scholar, religious scholar at Yale University. Here's George, of course. This is his eldest child and eldest daughter, Florence. His second eldest, Harriet, who the newspapers described as being, and I quote, boy crazy. And the disappointments in his life, this is the twins, George Jr. and Walter Sanger. Both of them died before they were 30 and were in the newspaper multiple times. Went through the 19th century equivalent of the Betty Ford Clinic. Here you can see a newspaper article about George Jr. where he's been named as a co-respondent in a divorce proceeding. Broke up a marriage with Mrs. Blanche Flowers, was threatened, all that kind of stuff. His father had to pay a considerable fortune to hush up yet another scandal with the boys. It's worth going back here to note Florence. Now, of all the children in his family and his wife and everything, the only one he really got along well with was Florence Pullman. And she later went on to marry a man who became Governor Loudon, who was, of course, governor of the state of Illinois and presidential candidate at one time. She was the only one who could talk to him with any. It must have been a very lonely life, as I was saying. Now, George, after he left New York to seek his fortune, came to the city of Chicago to answer a contract that the city of Chicago had let out, that to raise buildings. Basically, they would raise the buildings, put the sewer system directly on the street, and then pave over it, as opposed to the way Seattle did it, which was actually to dig and then go from there. Here you see the Briggs House Hotel. Briggs House Hotel was lifted by all these guys with jacks, and supposedly the Briggs House Hotel, as you can see up here, was still occupied as they did this, and not a cup was broken, according to George Pullman. He learned to do this with his father. They raised and moved a lot of buildings in the Erie Canal, so he got quite good at it and made a considerable fortune in the city of Chicago, raising buildings in 1857. He got so good at it to the point he was raising entire blocks. Now, coincidentally, this beautiful, glorious painting you see here is actually the place where I'm talking to you from. This is what became the Thompson Center eventually, and amusingly, P.T. Barnum had his headquarters right where I'm talking to you from. But he raised this entire block all in one fell swoop, and it survived, did beautifully. This painting, by the way, can be seen at the Chicago History Museum. From Chicago, he went to Colorado in 1859. He made money the only way you can make money in a gold rush situation by selling provisions and supplies to other miners. This house was still around in the 1960s, his little base of operation there, and unfortunately got torn down. Here's a postcard from when it was a gas station in 1930. Now, as he was traveling all over the country, this is the accommodations that he had to deal with, that people had to deal with in the time. You would sit on these rather hard, menacing-looking benches, and at night, this top would fold up, this shelf thing would come down, and you would form 3 very narrow bunks. There's no pillows. It's about 1.5 feet wide. It's a very thin covering over a hard plank. No blanket, no privacy, no bathroom, no nothing. So it's a miserable way to travel. This is Pullman's solution, and this is how he eventually made his money. This is a Pullman Palace car. That's what he called it, a Pullman hotel car. These seats would fold together to form a bottom bunk. This top shelf thing would fold down to form another bunk. There were curtains, there was a sitting area, there were bathrooms. It was heated, it was pleasant and comfortable. Pullman realized early on that you could make a lot of money by charging people to arrive in comfort and safety. In fact, the company motto became travel in safety and comfort. And he convinced investors to help him build 3 very expensive cars for the time and lease the services out on the train. In a tremendously clever PR stunt, he donated the use of these cars to Lincoln's funeral cortege. Here you see actually the Pullman car where Lincoln's body was laid in state, and as it made its way from Washington D.C. to Springfield, thousands upon thousands of people got to see the inside of a Pullman Palace car. On the strength of this rather clever publicity stunt, he got a number of investors to invest in creating the Pullman Palace Car Company. Its first headquarters were leased spaces in Detroit, actually. Here is the Detroit shops. You can see a very skilled craftsman here, hand detailing a painting. You can see these elegant punch tin and carved wood doors. Here's George Pullman, a young George Pullman out there supervising what's going on. He rapidly outgrew these Detroit facilities, and 10 years later, by the way, this is what the interior of one of these glorious coaches would look like. Like I said, these shelves fold down, these benches fold together to form a seat, curtains come on. It's just the height of elegance. 10 years later, he decided that he had outgrown the facilities, and he again got investment to actually purchase 3,000 acres in secret, the far, far south side of Chicago, basically outside of the boundary of the city of Chicago. And he would develop a town with a factory in the middle. He called it the world's most perfect town because it was supposedly he had learned all these lessons in his life about how people should live together and how a company town should work. Here is a view of the factory that he built from 1890. You see the main administration building here, and row upon row upon row of factory buildings to build train cars. In the back you see the smokestack of the Corliss engine. In 1876, Pullman went to the Philadelphia Exposition and purchased the great steam engine that powered the entire thing, brought it to Pullman in 70 train car loads, and reassembled it, and it powered the entire factory. Here is the water tower, which was kind of an interesting architectural building. It was the second tallest building in the United States for a long time, and unfortunately both of these were destroyed in 1956 due to a fire. The way the Pullman assembly line system worked, the way he could turn out rail cars very effectively and very efficiently, was each one of these bays represented a different manufacturing process in the construction of a rail car. And this little engine that you see right here would take the train car, the shell of it, from bay to bay to bay, and as it progressed through the manufacturing steps, it would get built up, and eventually, lo and behold, there's a train car. Here's the view of the little engine that brought the car back and forth through its various manufacturing processes. Here, of course, is a shell of a rail car. Now, as I said, the part where I come in, the part that is still around, the factory, of course, is long closed, and only a few buildings of the whole factory complex remain. But the town that he built is still 98% complete. It still almost exactly looks the same way. The trees are taller, basically. This is a view of Arcade Park, a very formal park that was, of course, maintained by the Pullman Company. This is the Greenstone Church, which any congregation could rent, provided you had enough money. And we will be, of note, we will be talking about this particular building a little bit. That was the first house that we lived in Pullman. We moved around the corner from it, where we live now. This is the inside of the Pullman Greenstone Church. Like I said, any congregation could rent it as long as they had enough money. All of the structures in Pullman belonged to the Pullman Company. So you would rent anything. You would rent a room in a house, or you'd rent the entire house, depending on how much money you had. This church, by the way, still looks almost exactly this way. Unfortunately, the stencils are long gone, but it looks pretty much this way. Here's the arcade building. This was unfortunately torn down in 1927. It was an indoor shopping mall, and it's a beautiful building, or was a beautiful building. Shops on the first floor here, which of course, again, any merchant could rent, and you can see the Arcade Mercantile Exchange. Here's a dry goods store. Here's an insurance salesman. Up here is, on the second floor, is a theater. The library's here, which was a subscription library, post office, and the bank. The bank is still around. It's gone through several ownership changes and grown rather large, but it's still around. Here's the interior of the bank. This photograph was generously given to the Pullman State Historic Site by the Kurt Teich Archives at the Lake County Museum, and this is a postcard of it. Actually, this postcard was taken in its Bonnie and Clyde days. We're taking this photo, interestingly, we're taking this photograph from the armored pillbox that the Pullman Company built inside the bank so that bank robbers couldn't hold it up. This is the interior of the theater, which unfortunately closed in 1906. It closed mainly because the stage was too small. They couldn't stage very profitable large productions, so it closed for economic reasons. The decorations of this was done by a prominent New York graphic artist named Hewson Hawley, who also did the library. This is a photograph of the second librarian named Bertha Ludlum, and despite the fact that she looks like the librarian from Ghostbusters, was an extremely effective librarian. She managed to bring this library from a subscription-based library to eventually becoming a successful branch of the Chicago Public Library System. She also introduced a lot of on-the-job training, innovation things for people to better themselves through the company. So she had branch libraries scattered throughout the Pullman Company. So very proud of her as a librarian. This is the Hotel Florence, and remember, Florence was his eldest daughter and his favorite child, the only one he could get along with. And it is sited on Florence Boulevard, so you get an idea of his affection for her. It is right across the street from the Pullman factory. If you were coming to do business with the Pullman Company, you would get off at a train station that was here, and this would be the first thing you would see. The Pullman factory, the elegance of the Pullman Hotel, the Florence Hotel, and the elegance of the arcade. It was kind of designed to bring you into a state of perfection, a state that you would think, boy, this company really has its act together. Like any pre-elevator hotel from the time, there was a large lobby with a large overhanging uh, porch system. The first floor was the best floor. The second floor was all right, and the third floor, of course, was for the servants and for the lesser clerks that you would bring with you on your trip. The only bar in Pullman, because Pullman himself was a teetotaler, the only bar in Pullman was in the Hotel Florence, and it was really a service bar. It was intended only drinks with dinner kind of thing. And of course, workers' housing. Like I said, all of the housing in all of the structures in Pullman were rentable from the company. So the company maintained your front yard and your backyard, painted the structure, made sure the windows were all right. They also were rather intrusive. If they didn't like the way your house looked, if they peeked in your window and saw it was too messy, they could come in and demand that you clean it up. The reason being that Pullman viewed this as a showpiece, as a centerpiece, and he would constantly bring visitors down. His offices were right next to the Art Institute. He would bring visitors down all the time to view his masterwork, this world's most perfect town, and he wanted everything to always be perfect. At the height of Pullman's employment, at the height of the company's production, there were 10,000 people living in basically 4 blocks by 7 blocks. There was a lot of employees, a lot of people living cheek by jowl before the age of television. So there was any number of things to do in the town. Here, for instance, is the Pullman Cricket Club. There were 2 cricket clubs, actually. Here's the Pullman Bike Race. It was a famous bike race that went from downtown to Pullman, and it was a rather rough and tumble bike race. There would constantly be reports in the newspapers about bikers getting into fistfights, bicyclists getting into fistfights, and trashing hotels and things like that. Here's the Pullman Band. There were actually 4 bands that toured the country. They were quite famous in the golden age of bands, of brass bands. This man is named Hostratter. He was the timekeeper of the Pullman Company, but more importantly, he was an experienced band leader. Pullman hired him specifically to lead this band, to manage the bands, and gave him a job in the factory just as a way to pay him. In the middle of the Pullman, in the town of Pullman, there was also a market hall, which you could rent. Mere mortals could rent a stall in there, and you could sell things like produce, vegetables you would grow in your back garden, or things that you had for sale. There was also a meeting hall on the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor was an armory. Pullman had a militia for a brief span of time until 1900. Like many towns in the United States, would maintain a small militia because there was not a very large United States standing army at the time. Now, if you've heard of Pullman at all, you probably remember them from your high school days with the Pullman strike. Pullman strike occurred in 1894, mainly because the United States went through a rather severe recession having to do with the price of gold and price of silver, and the worst recession of the 19th century. Pullman, remember, you rented buildings from Pullman. Despite the fact that Pullman cut wages and laid people off and fired and collapsed entire departments, it still expected people to pay rent in the same amount of rent. He still expected that same level of return from his workers. And at a certain point, people just had enough. They tried to organize a massive all-encompassing railway union. Eugene Debs was instrumental in that, and the strike failed, basically, but lasted throughout the summer of 1894. It was a nationwide strike. There was no violence in the town of Pullman itself, but there were certainly people killed in other parts of the United States. Danville, I believe, had casualties, Danville, Illinois, Sacramento, California. You see here the mustering of the troops that they would do every morning to kind of intimidate the strikers. They had, actually out of sight of here, they had several batteries of cannon, and these soldiers were sleeping on the lawn at the Hotel Florence here and in train cars right along the way, so they could rush to strike locations as needed. That first photo that we saw with Pullman and his family at that Fairlawn estate, that photo is from him retreating from this strike. He viewed this as the world's most perfect town, these are my children kind of thing, and he took this strike very bitterly. He took it as a personal affront. He went to Fairlawn and kind of licked his wounds and never forgave the strikers for it. He died pretty shortly after this in 1897. Now, the images that I've shown you are all from the collection of the Pullman State Historic Site. It's a rather large archive of images that were at the point where I started working with them were just that, a collection of images, of photographs and realia and advertisements and things in a stack. What do we do? How do we work with it? Well, I developed a series of custom programs to present these images to the internet and to manage these images on the back end, and that's what we're going to be looking at. The URL, now I won't be going live to a lot of this because we found that sometimes the Adobe Connect and this software are not as happy together as they might be, but please at your convenience have a look at this URL, which is pullman-museum.org. Now, if I don't blow up the internet, let's try and go quickly to the web. All right, here's our site, actually. And I want to show you the front page of it. Here's another view of the Hotel Florence, of course. It has upcoming events. There's a long list of things that goes on, and all kinds of information about Pullman, including a catalog of the images and so forth that we have. As I switch, we've tried to make this as user-friendly and as ADA compliant as we can. You can switch the colors of the web page, which, believe it or not, have been very helpful with ADA compliance. Of course, you can move the type font sizes up and down, and you can move it from 2 columns to 1 column to make it a little easier to read or make it a little easier to print. Moving it from 2 columns to 1 column, when I increase the font, makes it easier for people with sight problems to be able to read this, and also helps screen readers. All right, let's go back to our slideshow. All right. Like I said, please follow along. At some point, have a look at this offline. I've done a bunch of screen captures to show you the experience. I've developed a browse system, basically, so those images that we saw, how to get the metadata, how to get the information presented in a logical format that you can actually use, these are the screens. This is under the catalog link. You can see I've got a standard browse list system with a short description, image, and clickable links. The subjects are underneath it. These are the subjects that they've developed a subject taxonomy for the Pullman collection. There are other collections that are part of the Pullman State Historic Site that are kind of under an Industrial Heritage Archive banner. The Calumet Heritage Partnership and the Southeast Chicago Historical Society. We also have worked very closely with the Arthur Dubin collection from Lake Forest College. And clicking on a record, I get a brief record. I got a little thumbnail of it. Clicking on expand, of course, expands out the image itself. This is, of course, the Hotel Florence. This is an image from the Columbian Exposition. Pullman, by the way, was the president of the Columbian Exposition and ran the town of Pullman as an extension of the Columbian Exposition. He ran 14 trains a day to and from the neighborhood and housed a lot of people in the town of Pullman for the Columbian Exposition. Now, of course, people can just right-click and download the 72 DPI image of this if they want to have it for a report or just, hey, that's a neat image. We can also modified a postcard program that can actually send themselves a better quality image through a postcard system, through email. And finally, if they want actual physical high-res scans or they want to be able to publish the image, there's, of course, a whole rights and reproduction system that we've got. Clicking on that little red cross under more information actually will bring up more information, bring up the metadata that's associated with this particular image. And you can see its bibliographic dimensions and the locator information. This is the public view of the metadata. All of the metadata is contained in XML records online. It is also kept in a hybrid MySQL database system combined with this XML system. The MySQL system allows for the database system allows for very quick retrieval and sorting of images, which we'll look at. I've also done subject analysis and also subject delineation of the different types of things that we have: images, ads, books, serials. Faceted browsing, I believe the proper term is. Here, for instance, are some Pullman ads under H. The Pullman company had a huge advertising component, and they're ad after ad after ad. Every time you go to a flea market, you will be able to find Pullman ads in the cutout for sale, cutout magazine stuff. Here's the serial holdings. Again, I've used this kind of paradigm of clicking on a red plus sign to expand the holdings. So there's a whole serial management system behind this. And we have a system for dealing with compound objects. In other words, multiple images, but the same metadata connected to those multiple images. For instance, these are all photographs from a celebration of 500,000 155 millimeter shells produced during the Second World War at the Pullman Company. And these are all photographs from that event. Of equal importance to the number of photos and realia and objects and things that are in the Pullman State Historic Site, the people of Pullman, the researchers of Pullman who've lived there, have for many years been working on a Pullman House History project. And it is composed of information about residents of Pullman up till 1930, and also information about the people and maps of Pullman. Here, for instance, are stories that we've developed about Pullman. Here's Pullman during the Spanish flu epidemic, who died 1918-1919. the role of the development of softball, which was called indoor baseball, and the town of Pullman. The aforementioned Pullman militia. We have many stories about just people's lives and how they interacted with history and things like that. We also have a large collection of maps online, any map that we can find of Pullman that would help illustrate the history of it and how the town developed. A complete set of Sanborn fire insurance maps, which I will have you know I hand-colored one day. We have a set of the 1897, 1911, and 1930 maps of the area, which illustrate the changes that the town went through, the company in particular went through. A complete description of the company facilities on the Sanborn map. And this map, you can go what's north of here, what's south, east, west. What did this area look like in 1911? What did this area look like in 1930? As I mentioned, we have a large number of records of people who lived and worked in Pullman. We have actually 38,000 records in our database that are from the 1883 city directory, the 1889 city directory, the 1916 phone book, which is the first time phone service was available in Pullman, and then the 1900, 1910, 1920, and 1930 censuses. We have yet to tackle the 1940 census. That will be a effort for another day, or should we get money. So looking at information on Pullman, we have house histories by address. So the house that I said we're going to look at 11145 South St. Lawrence, which used to be known before 1907, and this particular address, 133 Watt. By clicking on more information, I bring up the information about the house, who lived in it. Here's its current Cook County PIN number, property ID number. Here's a photograph from the Cook County site, which, as you can see, it's not formatted for this area. And then here's all the people that have lived in this house that we know of that we found in various city directories. These guys are interesting because they are related to the Swingle singers from the 50s. If you click on the More symbol here, it will, of course, give you much more information about the particular census record for that individual. Let's have a look at our third 1900 census person, Bror Olson. Give you some idea of how complicated this particular project was and how involved it was. By the way, I should mention that all these Sanborn maps, side discussion, all these Sanborn maps can be seen, I believe, through the Illinois State Library's map collection. And it's a wonderful resource. If I may put in a little advertisement for the home team glorious collection that we built up over the years. Anyway, returning. Olson Bror, here's his record, I presume of him. He's the head of this particular household. This is his wife. These are people who share the same name, is how we're related. The information from the census. But here, if you will pardon me, is why this has been so complicated. This is, I highlighted it kind of on this record. You can see how complicated this handwriting is, particularly from 1900 and 1910. Some of these records are quite indecipherable, so we've made our best guess, basically, with a lot of these names. However, at the bottom of each of these records is a, boy, we screwed up, or send us more information about this name, we'll correct it. We'll add the data to this particular record, and we get a lot of these changes. Here, for instance, is a record about Adeline Brunazzo from the 1930 census. Here's her, particular information, talking just trivia. We had oil stove heat. We didn't have any hot water or bathtub or shower until 1955. It was a party line phone with 3 people on it. Just interesting stuff to kind of describe, to further flesh out these people. We have a complete listing, of course, by last name. Kind of interesting, these first two. This James McMahon here, he was a musician in a 5-cent theater, so he was basically in 1910, he was kind of a Tin Pan Alley kind of musician for 20-minute Max Sinnott kind of reels. Let's have a look at the McQueens, and I can give you an idea of where we would like to go should we suddenly win the lottery or something like that. Malcolm McQueen, let's blow up this newspaper article from the Chicago Tribune in 1888. Poor Malcolm McQueen developed, I assume, a tumor or something like that, and he couldn't stand the pain anymore, so he hanged himself in his house in the basement. And it describes his record in the company. It describes, that he was a reliable and competent and decent man. And then we find, here's another record, also from 1888, Chicago Tribune. I kind of highlighted poorly, I see, because I didn't fill in the O's, but I highlighted two little bits that I found in this newspaper. First off, look, here's Calvin Swingle from 1145. We found a little bit of information about him. He succeeded John Brown as chief engineer. But Robert McQueen, the brother of Malcolm McQueen, comes to visit his sister-in-law, probably for the funeral. The funeral was held in that Greenstone church. The company let out early because he was so important. The works were closed during the afternoon, and 3,000 people crammed into that church. So, I mean, it's fascinating what you can find out from newspaper articles. And the newspaper article also gives you other information that will be related to goings-on in Pullman. We would also like to take information we find from other things, like the Pullman Car Works Standard is a magazine from 1919. Here's a photograph of John Davidson describing his company service. Here's his record in the Pullman census record. So now I actually have a photograph I could put with that census record, and I have information about what he did at the Pullman Company, where he was born. I can add that. Now, it's a huge project, developing infrastructure to pull in information from other sources, and that's where I hope we go with this data. We've also been able to categorize people by their occupation and by their place of birth, which will be very important when we do demographic studies. Unfortunately, we've got to do a lot of data normalization. For instance, you can see all the accountants. Well, they're different titles. Accountant, Pullman Palace Park Company. Accountant, mail order house. There's got to be a standardized way of describing these things, and that's going to be another project. We'll go through the 38,000 names and figure out a way to normalize the data to make it more standard across the way, so you can look at all the accountants in one way, and here's their different places of employment. Let me show you the back end of all this stuff, the Perl coding that goes into all this. Here I'm going to log in, and then I've got a full set of menus that I can go through. Catalog an object, work with the house histories, export records, other kinds of things. I can add a new record. And here we're going to do it. I'm going to I find a particular image that I need to add, and here I go. The image appears up here, and I can now start to categorize it. I can say it's an image, or it's an advertisement, or it's a handout or map, and fill in the data with it. Fill in the dimensions and the Shen Hall descriptors that are important for museum catalogs. Here's my serial holding system. I can edit or delete or modify this particular holding title. My export, I can export all these records into tab delimited, into Dublin Core, into a worksheet that the IHPA, the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency, needs to be able to work with them. I can add, delete, modify formats or collections or subjects. So I have a huge range of activities that I can do behind the scenes with this data. Now we've logged in, and I can go to a record, and as an employee, I can see the full information with this particular record. I can see the full locator information, who donated it, the scanning details. All of that is contained in a combination, as I said, of a MySQL data system and an XML sheet. Here is the MySQL main record. Now, the XML record for that particular image is a very long and extensive collection of data. The main record is a small subset of that data designed to quickly browse or find or arrange that image in a subject list or in a title list or in a description list, whatever you need to do. The sort string is a concatenation of the title so that it's quickly found in a pick list. This is the XML record. You can see it's a much more extensive arrangement of data. It's a much more extensive collection. This is the actual meat of the record itself. We've moved the census. We have the census data in the same manner. We have a quickie census thing, but I've also moved, because we're trying to edit the census data, I've also moved it onto a database, which makes it easier to take back and forth from database editing. So anyway, it's kind of a compromise. Eventually, I hope to move it off of this MySQL database to completely depend on the small MySQL, large XML paradigm that we've been working on. Now, forgive the silliness about the Boxer Rebellion, but we've also been able to take this data and expand it to other projects. There is a committee in the Pullman area called the Beeman Committee, which is responsible for helping people restore their houses and making sure that we conform to the Secretary of Interior's guidelines with those houses. And they have been working on a huge database of information about each house, only their database is, so here's our 11145 house again. It's basement type 1. It's a D9 main door. It's a P1. It's a P12D type porch. And there will be architectural drawings about each of these things, this porch type, this main door type, this window, this 9/2 window, that you can take and get reproduced or fix or whatever you need to do. So we'll have a complete set of data about each house if you need to restore it. Point is that we've got data in a database, and it can now be leveraged to do other projects, other amazing projects that are completely unexpected from what we originally set up. The Beeman Committee has been able to develop a whole homeowner's guide with this information. We've got grants from different, you can see, from different institutions that help people understand how to maintain their house, the history, what colors to use to be properly authentic, that kind of thing. And finally, I'd like to describe my favorite little side project. It is the music inspired by Pullman. Between 1871 and 1921, I found a number of sheet music, sheet music records of tunes that mention Pullman or are related in some way to Pullman. Here, for instance, is Corliss Engine March. Remember, the Corliss engine is the gigantic steam engine that drove the whole company. The Porter in a Pullman Car was a whole play about a whole musical comedy about life on a Pullman car as it goes through the country. And I've taken these tunes and optically, musically recognized them. I scanned them and ran them through a program that converted them into music. Now, unfortunately, we can't play them here, but please feel free to visit the page and click on them and listen to these tunes. The tunes that you will hear are actually computer generated. They're actually MIDI files. No human being was involved in making them, with the exception of the original scanning and stuff. So, that, my friends, is that. Be more than happy to answer any questions about any of this madness, and I hope that made sense, and let me know if I can illustrate or help you or answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. That was just a fascinating presentation. I think that the Pullman District and Foundation is quite fortunate to have you as a resident and a very passionate, interested professional, too.
Meg asks, can the processes of pulling in supporting images, documents, data be automated? How are all the sources brought into a record connected to the originals and each other? Well, the first part is, I'm not sure what you're saying. Can the process of pulling and supporting images be automated? I would love to be able to do that. It will take a great deal of descriptive cataloging and a great deal of discovery of newspapers. For instance, there is a scrapbook that the Pullman company maintained. They maintain it through a clipping service, and the scrapbooks are at the Newberry Library. Now, for I think $10,000 or something like that, we could get a copy of them. We could get a digital copy of them, but somebody has to go through each and every one of the scrapbook pages and look at page after page and newspaper article after newspaper article and catalog those and associate those with people's names. So it's quite a project. It's a huge project, in fact. What will be interesting is how we go about solving that. I mean, we could do something like we could crowdsource it, but the software needs to be developed. Something like a modification of Wikipedia, of MediaWiki. I'm sorry, a modification of MediaWiki could be a way of doing it. But then we'd need things like, well, are you sure this is copyright cleared and stuff like that. So it's a lot of thorny issues that we're having to deal with. We can data mine the trib, but again, they own the copyright. We'd have to work out an agreement with them or with Heritage Quest or something. I'm sure we could, but that would have to be done. Now they've got, of course, they have that all digitized. They have that all, yeah, I know. They have that all digitized, and we could maybe work with them through Heritage Quest. It's quite a problem. It's quite a conundrum. And of course, this is my full-time job, working at the State Library, not at the Pullman State Historic Site. They're not the resources there. We would appreciate if, Mary Lynn writes, if a person wanted to post one of your images on a Facebook page, do they need to cite the source? I would appreciate, we would appreciate that they cite the source, and in fact it would be nice to link to the actual record itself. Are these collections connected to any digital preservation system? The digital preservation system is kind of, in a sense, a primitive. You know, we're preserving them in the proper format, you know, keeping on archival CDs and things like that, but an actual formal digital preservation system. No, actually the software was developed before that concept really had taken off. There's no lockbox system. There's no SHA encoding and make sure this is not muted. There's no data refresh and stuff like that. There needs to be. And again, it's something, this is a hobby, so when do we find time to do it? So, any other questions or any other obfuscations I can throw your way?
I have a personal question, Andrew, after watching your presentation, and I saw briefly on the Foundation's website, I believe it was the first Sunday of the month, our walking tours. What would you recommend as the best way to see the Pullman District?
Well, the first Sunday tours are wonderful. I've done a couple of them. They're a lot of fun. That tour is the actual Pullman factory site. That's the Pullman State Historic Site tour. That starts at 11, I think 11:30. I can't remember off the top of my head. And that lasts for an hour or so, depending on how pompous I feel or somebody else feels. And then at 1:30, there's an actual walking tour of the neighborhood. And that is run through the Historic Pullman Foundation, which is another group. It's a 501c3 preservation group in the area. I think that costs $5. I don't remember, but it's it's a great day. I mean, you go out, take a walking tour of the Pullman State Historic Site. The Hotel Florence is currently undergoing restoration, but that will be available soon. And then go have lunch at the Cal Harbor, a classic greasy spoon or something like that, and then come back for the HPF tour. And it's a full day of Pullman, more Pullman than you could deal with. So anyway.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for everybody. Thank you everybody for your time and for listening to me rant and rave.
Yes, it was our pleasure. Thank you, Andrew. And I also thank everyone for being here today. If any questions, please see our website. You can contact me and I can get you